Where do these diseases keep coming from? Well, the reality of the situation is that nature is still in full force. While humanity absolutely mogs this planet like Chads, well, sort of, nature is still just as capable of screwing us up. Many times, diseases will form within bat populations, which is just a proving ground for them, making the outbreaks worse and worse. Sometimes it just jumps to humanity and we realistically have no way to counter it. And then others, it's just complete luck of the draw, which brings us around to today's episode. In the events of Outbreak, humanity is dealing with something that, well, if it were to make it to major shipping hubs, it could or could not be a major problem, I guess. The reality is, just because an infection is fast-acting does not mean it's completely insurmountable. If anything, this can be detriment to it. However, this one's going airborne, and it would liquefy the organs of humanity, and seemingly does so within hours. So in today's episode, let's discuss the Motaba virus, the symptoms it induces, how a few scientists were able to overcome it, and how it was already kind of known about, and why you should know every country worth its weight in salt already does this. In fact, if you really need some existential dread, 23andMe got hacked, genetic information was taken, and we don't know who has it or what they could be developing with it. Great. Anyways, I'm going to start this off by saying I was like 5,038% sure I had already covered this. I would put money on it. In fact, I know somewhere I have a script that was already written. I just can't find it. I swear I've been Mandela'd. I had to. Because, I remember, I even rented this movie before to cover it. I don't know where it's at. Anyways, I looked on my channel. I didn't see it anywhere. So we're just going to assume I didn't do it. So just enjoy this episode. Anyways, we're just going to move ahead. The single biggest threat to man's continued dominance over this planet is a virus. Very true. And with the Andes virus making its rounds, you need to understand something. This is me talking to you. I'm not saying people cannot be infected, but there is some serious PTSD from the year of our Lord 2020 or something, because this virus, it's not that. It needs incredibly close contact to spread, like swapping spit or close enough to inhale particles from their cough. It's not as infectious as other viruses, but it is still, just be careful who you're making out with. So everyone, just relax a little bit. In fact, I think by the time this video comes out, 3 weeks should have passed. So either I'm right and nobody even remembers it, or it's a complete hellscape out there. Let me know down in the comments. Heading to a jungle, the predator is in there somewhere, but in this particular part, a group of soldiers are engaged in fighting as it's July 1967 at Motaba Valley. As soldiers are yelling about something, I remember literally writing about how 1967 was an amazing year for Impala. I'm telling you. I'm so worried I've already covered this, but I can't find it. I don't get it. Anyway, so as the doctor walks through talking about what they need for a cure, the soldiers then ask to be brought home as they draw some samples and then decide, I'm good, and leave out of there. Taking off out of the area, they are still actively being bombarded as a plane then shows up with everyone cheering because, hooray, plane. As then it goes to drop a straight up Moab on them, the entire area is then cleared out. Well, that sucks. As some monkeys run by, it is now present day. Oh hey, this is exactly where my girlfriend worked for a little while. Good old USA MRIID. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? It appears as though, I can't remember exactly what she did, but I think she was a scientist as well. What a friggin' nerd. Anyways, as we walk through, we are headed to the virology section. It's only a BSL-1 though, so nothing to worry about. As now we head to the real stuff, BSL-2s, much more infectious, before heading into an open lab for some reason, which is a BSL-3. Okay, hold up. Why are all the doors open? That makes very little sense. Once you start getting to BSL-3s, you typically aren't just entering those for funsies. Oh look, a scientist not wearing gloves, touching her ventilator, and then walking out without even washing her hands. Yeah, okay. So everything is cross-contaminated now. Hollywood does not know about standard procedures, apparently. There would not just be people vibing in this section with doors open. You typically keep wet labs away from heavy traffic areas so that you can control exposure. This is just begging for an outbreak. More so given, he said it, the movie. Anyways, more so given no other military member is actually wearing any lab coats or PPE or ventilators or anything. Well, ventilators are masks, basically. So following one guy, he then just straight up heads into the BSL-4, where everyone is getting geared up. As two others enter the room, it's one of the scientists' last day. That'll be his ex-wife. Man, 8 hours from retirement. Hopefully nothing bad happens. Meanwhile, back over at a house, Uncle Sam here is washing the quadrupeds. The guy then is calling and informing him of a level 4. Heading to his ex-wife's house, he then drops the dogs off. Uncle Sam then informs the ex he has to go to Zaire, and she's like, well, you need to be back in time because I have to go to Atlanta. Probably the CDC, I imagine, as then he grabs his coffee cup, which, by the way, her being upset that he has to be back in time makes no sense, and we'll get there. Anyway, she packed up his photos as he tells her, I don't want them, and she's like, well, I don't want them either. Okay, well then just have a nice little bonfire in the backyard and burn them all. Sometimes you gotta do that. Back over in the loading area, we meet Private Pervert and Morgan Freeman, who is simply Morgan Freeman. Catching Uncle Sam up on the going on, he then tells him to get in and get out. Leaving out for Zaire, Private Pervert then looks over at Snow Dogs. This guy's a major, right? But he appears to be just super jazzed to be there. Usually majors are much more like beaten down. My girlfriend's a captain. She's pretty beaten down. Anyways, flying 2 helicopters, they're just dangerously close for reasons unknown. They then touch down in the valley as they go to take a look around. The village is on fire with everyone laid out for the ability to be set on fire, I guess, which is pretty bunched a bummer. And approaching one of the buildings, everyone in there ain't looking so hot. Hemorrhagic issues, it appears. The Major has a freak out for some reason, as then he just decides to take off his helmet. The doctor comes in saying it's not airborne, which... This is going to be a complete lie later, but again, why take your helmet off? Bro, just throw up in your helmet. I used to play football. I threw up in my helmet plenty of times. It just is. Discussing the case as Uncle Sam then takes off his helmet too. Absolutely not. I don't care if someone starts saying it's not airborne or not. You simply do not know all the exposure vectors. Why would you put yourself at risk like this? Everybody in this movie has no affiliation with outbreaks whatsoever. The microbiology is all wrong. This is dumb. Anyways, he is no longer claimed as an epidemiologist or virologist or whatever he's supposed to be because there's no shot he would have made it this far. Been like, oh, it's not airborne? Cool, let me take off my helmet. Does the air taste like pennies to anybody else? So he's informed that whatever this is, it came from the jungle because the nearest village is over 50 miles away, as one guy then chants on a hill. Leaving that area, the monkeys then start shrieking as they are watched by the witch doctor on said hill. Discussing with Private Pervert, incubation time is short, and the Major is freaking out about putting the team in danger, and then he cries about it. Okay. One of the monkeys is also back near the village, and it got trapped. Talking to Morgan Freeman about what is going on, he is then informed the virus takes people out way too fast. Also, why is he wearing his BDUs at this party? I have no idea. Also, fast-acting viruses actually are a detriment to themselves. We'll kind of talk about that in the science portion, but it is something to absolutely remember about them. While they can inspire horrific and fast-acting symptoms, it actually limits their spread. So back on a random ship, a man then feeds one of the monkeys a banana for some reason, as Uncle Sam then helps his ex pack her stuff into the taxi. Why? Apparently she's upset. She then blames him for being late, and that made her late. But, she didn't need him to be there to leave with the dogs in the first place. Like, she wanted the dogs. Why does he need to be there? They then talk about what the dog's like, as then she asks about Zaire. She tells him to be careful, as then she heads out. Again, she didn't have to wait for him, she just did. Back over at Uncle Sam and Private Pervert, they discuss the virus, as Private Pervert tells them to move on from Blondie. Taping up their suits, they then find a tear in Uncle Sam's suit, and in connecting positive pressure, they grab some of the Motaba, as Private Pervert then tosses him a sample, except not really. The virus invades cells within 5 hours, and then takes those cells. After that, the virus inundates the entire body, and then moves on to the next body, as it is a super spreader. Back at the monkey lab, Freeman then enters the area and grabs some of the Motaba. Handing it off to the others, they appear to be looking for something, but we're not informed as to what. Turning on the TV, the stuff found in 1967 is identical to what they have now, which really, it just looks like Ebola. Uncle Sam then comes in asking why he's being sent away from this particular virus. Protesting this, he's being sent away intentionally, but he doesn't really understand it and gets upset. Meanwhile, in the animal holding facility, Forklift Certified steals one of the monkeys and then pays off the guard. Good thinking, bro. Meanwhile, we jump over to the real nerds, where they're really at, the CDC in Atlanta, huge dorks. It do be that way. As Uncle Sam then argues with his ex, fun times. Meanwhile, Forklift Certified is driving through the redwood forest as he gets spit in his face. Probably spit. I'm not gonna look into what that is. Dropping the monkey off and then scratches the new owner immediately. Well, not really the owner, more like the pet store owner. Then back over to the CDC, Blondie then heads into an office that would appear to be cool, but given the ceiling is sunlight, do you understand how hot it gets in Atlanta? Indirect sunlight during the summer, it's broiling. This office would suck. It would be so hot in there. And like the sun would just be beating down on you all the time. Anyways, Forklift Certified now goes to release a tropical monkey in a completely new biome where it has no food and would probably just freeze. Cool, bro. Immediately jumping on a plane for some reason, as is standard for anyone sick. You know how it goes. A youngling then asks for a cookie as his mom stops him. From an incredibly sick-looking person. I would never in my life. Also, why is that kid wandering around the plane? Getting home, he then makes out with his woman, as why she would immediately kiss him? Look at this dude, he's gross looking. So the pet store owner has a crash out as of his own, as over in the lab, another nerd gets sprayed with blood somehow. Maybe if everyone wasn't so incompetent, this outbreak wouldn't be an issue. Meanwhile, ex-wife needs to get on a plane to Boston on a hunch by the way. Talking to Forklift Certified, she asks if he had contact with any animals, as then he just flatlines out. The girlfriend then crashes out as they go to do an autopsy on him. I'm not 100% sure why a scientist is being given an autopsy knife, but this is crazy. Like, I get that you're like oh, I'm trying to figure out what this disease is. They would never give you the ability to do an autopsy on someone who succumbed to a disease. You do not have the qualifications for that. Good lord. Just because you do science doesn't mean all science is available to you. Calling back home to Uncle Sam, she reports his organs were basically liquid. Ouchies. They recreate the timeline of how the outbreak actually began. Back over in California, Intern decides to go to the movie despite feeling like absolute crap, as he forgets to actually cover his mouth anytime he coughs. Thanks, Typhoid Tommy. Convulsing and falling down, the monkey's just vibing as the doctor there says he needs to fight as his girlfriend is sick now. Does no one pay attention to their body? So everyone is coming in sick now as all get out. It's quick, get on a plane. Make sure you get as many of the sick people on planes as possible. Ex-wife reports they are in the clear to a group who celebrate, which, why would you declare that exactly? How do you know? How do you know that that guy didn't interact with a taxi cab driver on the way out? Like, that is such a crazy thing, a few hours to be like, oh, well, we're all good. You don't know that at all, which just makes this beautiful because then they get something that completely counteracts it. So Uncle Sam then argues with Freeman about being sent out as Uncle Sam power walks across the base. He lies to the sergeant about where he's supposed to go, insubordination, as he goes and gets on a plane to California. Also going AWOL. Good plan, brother. Meanwhile, Freeman goes in with no gloves on and pulls a sample. Talking quietly on the phone to Freeman about the outbreak, they're in cahoots. Back over in California, oh thank God, the government has arrived, we're all saved. Locking down whatever town this is apparently there's only one bridge in and out of here. Having already donned their PPE, they then head into town where everyone is upset. Heading to town hall, ex-wife says she's in charge. Not anymore, you're not, because Uncle Sam is here, which apparently not anymore, he's not either, or something. Then heading to the sick bay, lots of people infected. They got it last night at the movie. One guy has no contact with anyone, and he was actually in isolation. Oh good, it's gone airborne. Well, now you're boned. Congratulations. A helicopter descends with Freeman as then he heads into an FOB. Freeman gives the orders to arrest Uncle Sam as everyone is yelling at them. As they compare the viruses, on the outside they can see that the virus actually spreads like the flu due to a mutation. They don't know if this could have just spontaneously mutated, so Private Pervert thinks maybe the host animal was carrying both strains, which does happen. As a virus is in the body, it will mutate within the body. So as a Humvee drives through, everyone is quite upset. Uncle Sam comes in to talk to Freeman, informing him that it's airborne. Freeman then tells him he could be wrong, but they are facing a new strain that would render us extinct or at least send us back to the Stone Age. Uncle Sam then tells Freeman not to threaten him or his crew. The media now reports everything is contained as the military keeps trying to keep people out. Yes, let's report everything's contained. We don't know. Let's just do it anyways. Back over at the store, they find a monkey laying there, probably just hungry and dehydrated, as military starts pushing people back. As a few go to escape, dude, nice Fords. Like, ironically, one of them is a white Bronco. Woo. However, one of those bad boys, I believe, is a 1970s Ford F-100 Ranger. If you put these things on, like, some actual 33s or 35s, dude, they are pretty bad. Bad as in good, by the way. Like, you know, Michael Jackson bad. But you know what headcanon says? This bad boy probably has a 360 V8 in it, which means it has 215 horsepower and 375 pound-foot of torque at 2,600 RPM. These things are freaking awesome. I need to get one, but first things first, I need to finish working on my 3rd-gen 4Runner, which is absolutely the most goated of vehicles ever made. Anywho, so the Humvees just kind of give up the chase at first, as in they're threatened that they will get lit up if they keep driving, returning fire for God knows what reason. Bro, you are completely outmatched. The square body gets lit up as the white Bronco decides not to go that way. Jazzed Major over here, you know what? Major Happy says the host monkeys have no antibodies to the original strain. Installing a curfew, everyone is then told, go home. Bro, you better believe if I assume there's some sort of outbreak that's airborne like this, the only thing I'm doing is taping up my windows and putting my air conditioning on recirculate in the house. Apart from that, I'm probably not even drinking the water that is coming from the tap. Like, it'd be like, everything is locked down. This has become a new... Which, by the way, if you didn't know that, that's a good way to kind of stop things from getting into your house. Tape up your windows if you have essentially any type of issue. Also, it's been known to stop radioactive fallout, like the particles from being able to enter your house. So, you know, basically you want to... The easiest way to do it is if you do tape up the windows. I sound really paranoid right now, but these are just things that I know. Sorry, I'm going to pass them along to you, so now you sound paranoid when you tell people. But you can tape up the windows, and then you can tape up around the door on the outside areas. That way it has less of a chance of getting in. Anyways, so Uncle Sam now comes in finding Freeman. They have an experimental antiviral medication, apparently, from Yale, as it's alleged. Which, liar, but it could be worth a try, I suppose. You never know. But Uncle Sam says it won't work. Okay, you don't know that either. Everybody here operates on the assumption they know everything, but know nothing simultaneously. So Colonel Doom and Gloom continues to argue, and as they bicker, she just flatlines out. Nice job, guys. Bring the antiviral back to Happy Time Major. The military then tells everyone, if they feel bad, just come outside. Everything is cool, don't worry about it. Going door to door, people were being rounded up as sick. Bummer, bro. Almost hitting the soldiers transporting the sick. They then bring the sick back to the lab area and draw blood. Meanwhile, Private Pervert looks through the blood, seeing how many people are actually infected. Yeah, it's an outbreak. No need to get so emotional about it, man. It just is what it is. Keeping the sick in one location, a call is then made to the animal holding facility as Uncle Sam and Private Pervert are freaking out on one another as they are both tired. Meanwhile, Private Pervert breaches his suit and then leaves the lab, being like, oh, I'm good. But you know, here's the thing that's crazy about this, right? He does get infected here. And I don't really know how to put this, but they don't really tell us what happens to Private Pervert at any point in the movie. Maybe like the extra features had it or something, but they never go back to that guy. And also, he has a positive pressure suit. Positive pressure suits are kind of important because what happens is they're pressurized. So if something, nicks it or happens to tear something, it'll actually push a ton of air outwards, preventing any of the virus from actually getting in. That's the whole point. This is literally the only reason why positive pressure suits exist, to prevent any air that could be contaminated from an airborne pathogen from making its way into your body. Also, wet pathogens too, because it'll just create air bubbles that pushes them out. Apparently the suit failed though, so ex-wife comes back to check on him as he says, oh, I just got a sudden case of the willies. Brother, little did we all know, this guy gives everybody a case of the willies. Meanwhile, as the government conducts a meeting, which they love for some reason, about how fast this will spread, they discuss vaporizing the town. I believe it's the president who's absolutely based, as he says, weird, I don't remember reading in the Constitution talking about vaporizing our citizens. The only way he will do this is if everyone has a unanimous vote, and then he puts the photos on the table telling them to burn every person into their memories. They're not stats, they're people. Again, a pretty base president. Meanwhile, Ebola Monkey has found a house. Fantastic. Back at the FOB, General Locks over here gets out of the helicopter as he meets with Freeman. Freeman attempts to talk him out of vaporizing the town as he counters this with them just being casualties of war. Little war hungry there, brother, not gonna lie to you. Back at the animal holding facility, Bossman then asks the security guard 2 questions. What were those? We will never know. Meanwhile, Uncle Sam then hits on his ex-wife, which, nah, this ain't it, Chief. However, in the window, the monkey is doing much better. Apparently, this antiviral was created to take out the Motaba specifically. Private Pervert now drops because he was in fact infected. His internal temp was apparently at 106 degrees, putting some ice on him. He's delirious and has probably lost some brain cells at this point, as his ex-wife then sticks her finger as she is also infected, which, not Private Pervert's ex-wife, Uncle Sam's ex-wife. So she's bleeding. Not good. Bummer, bro. You are now infected. Cut off your hand. Ex-wife has a crash out about this as Uncle Sam informs her there is something to say about what he can do. Driving over to the FOB, he accuses Freeman knowing about Motaba. This virus was basically created, so that's why they can't cure it, because it's now mutated. Very good. Freeman says they have to develop this stuff to protect themselves, which basically, as terrible as it is, every country is working on this crap. Biological stuff, It is what it is. Everybody says they don't, but they do. Horrific. Anyways, leaving that area, Uncle Sam then gets on the phone with Major Happy about the animal that was being smuggled. Uncle Sam then says if he's not back by 1800, she needs to leave town as long as she's not symptomatic. The military has now arrived to arrest Uncle Sam. Major Happy and Uncle Sam now leave as nobody recognizes them apparently, and then lying to his sergeant, the pilot is taking a leak, so they just go and jack the helicopter to take off before soldiers can get to them. General Locks over here gives the order to shoot down the helicopter on sight, but nobody does, because plot armor. And then heading to what's affectionately known as a federal building, Uncle Sam gets told by a bureaucrat to go to the back of the line. Classic. And looking at the shipping manifest, they find the vessel, as the woman there says she can make a call. And then Uncle Sam's like, well, how close are you? And she's like, closer than me and his wife would like. Or me and his wife. His wife would like. Gross. That's all I can say. Mildred's be getting around. Anyways, back over at the unaffected family home, allegedly anyhow, the little girl is drawing about a monkey. Flying through some fog, they are looking for something as ex-wife is displaying symptoms. Oh no, she's symptomatic before 1800. Finding the vessel in the fog, as Major Happy goes in and everyone points to them, Uncle Sam then jumps off from the helicopters and he says, does anybody speak English? Might have been good to know that from the drop. He then tells the crew he's a doctor, and entering the freezer, one man apparently was sealed off, the guy who fed the monkey the banana from earlier. Heading upstairs, he checks his locker, as he just so happens to have a picture of the monkey. What are the odds? Private Pervert ain't looking so good at this point, as ex-wife is also looking into her own future because she's looking rough as well. Private Pervert says he's scared, as we now jump back over to another area of California. I know, the hell on earth. Entering a news studio, they take over the broadcast as Uncle Sam says he is not infected, and he says the monkey is the source of the infection. The mom apparently hears this and realizes maybe that's why her daughter was drawing pictures of a monkey. So reaching out to the family, I guess, they get to Palisades now as Uncle Sam watches the apples to see if the monkey comes to eat them. The girl says it won't come unless she's out there. Uncle Sam then talks to the girl about being sick and how she must help them. He says they won't hurt the monkey except maybe trinket, but he needs it immediately. At this point, the plan is now to vaporize the town much in the same way they did to that village in 1967. Back over at Patient Zero house, Major Happy isn't looking so friendly as the girl then calls out to the monkey. Spotting the monkey, the girl gets in the way of the shot. Get out of the way! Major Happy then trips as he's able to trinket though, even though he fell. General Locks then heads over to the house at this point as Uncle Sam tells Freeman they need to call off vaporizing the town as they have the host. Hopefully he listens, but he also might just be afraid because he's literally a turd in the punch bowl. Freeman then tells Viper 6 to stand down and return to base. They didn't want to do that anyway, so they're like, alright, sure. So then they head back to base, deciding not to take out this entire town of people. Arguing with the general over where to take the host, they decide that they need to bring down the helicopter instead, even though it literally has the cure. Continuing evasive maneuvers as they go to cut him off, they fail that endeavor and decide to just go into the bridge and keep firing on them. Almost causing these people to crash like two helicopters that are attacking. The general's like, they did that on purpose. You don't say. That's crazy. Who would have guessed? You're shooting at them and they decide to like try to make you guys crash. Like, wow. Hey, any more revelations that we need to discuss? Yeah, of course it was on purpose, dude. Like, what are you talking about? So firing a few missiles, this confuses the other pilots as they don't know if they actually crashed or if they kept moving on, so they just kind of bail on the chase, I guess, as in they bring the monkey to the lab because they made it back to that town. Taking some of its blood, ex-wife is looking a little sickly as he tells her she's going to be okay. They found the host. Not sure how he came to that conclusion, as then she starts to pass out. Like, it's going to take a little while to, like, synthesize his medicine. It's not like a fast process. So taking off his helmet, now he's infected. Wow. I'm not gonna lie, that's a really stupid gesture, brother. Okay, so Major Happy now arrives saying he has it. What exactly? Well, it's a bit hard to say. General Locks returns, even being told they have a cure. I guess bro just wants to vaporize a whole town anyways. Relieve that guy of his position immediately. Apparently, ex-wife is now stabilized, as Uncle Sam says the government wants it as a weapon, not as a cure. The government would never do that, right? Uncle Sam then calls out to the pilots as he tells them they must take out the town. Uncle Sam tells them that they have what is essentially the anti-serum, but General Locks tells his subordinate to just blow the craft out of the air. Uncle Sam tells them to only drop the Moab if they think that he's crazy, but not under orders. If they incinerate the town, they will incinerate the serum as well. Freeman lets him know how to actually stop the run, which should have been pretty clear from the beginning. He's like, if you stay in front of the plane, they won't be able to drop the Moab. Like, dude, yeah, of course they would, because they'd run into you, and that would, like, destroy the plane. Anyways, apparently, like, why would you tell him that's how you stop it? Okay, anyways, so telling the pilots he's not moving from their path, they then deviate at the last minute and go around. However, they were still able to drop it, but it was over the ocean instead, which is a beautiful solution to the anglerfish menace. If you didn't think that we were going to talk about that, bro, why are we not doing this? We should just find a way to send those into the deep depths where it just sends out a giant sonar pulse and just liquefies every anglerfish within a trillion radius mile thing. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Anyways, so they said this must have just been wind shear that, caused this issue, as Freeman tells them to ignore the order that General Locks gave as he continues with arresting General because, he's kind of been a douche. The colonel then pulls a force multiplier on him for withholding information from the president, as ex-wife is now feeling better, telling her it was a good nap. The anti-serum is being created as he's already been given it as well. I still think there's going to be some fairly severe organ damage for anybody who's been infected with this, but thus concludes Outbreak, a movie that allegedly I watched, wrote a script on, and then never recorded it, I guess. I have no idea what I was doing. Weird. Hello and welcome to the science portion of your nightmares, because a situation like this unfolding in real life is one of those that this movie seems like maybe it's an overreaction to the situation, but in actuality, it's not. Immediately Moabbing a group of people with just the standard variant is one thing, and probably a bad idea, but nuking an entire town with an airborne version of this would probably be very likely standard procedure depending on which country you're talking about. But there remains several questions about would this even be possible in the first place, and to that end, we need to understand what the actual virus is and what it does to the human body, because let me tell you, should things go down this way, we are talking about an extinction level event if it's able to get a foothold in humanity, unfolding all over the planet. So let us begin where we all know we need to. The beginning, I know. Whoa. So first things first, I'm the realist, which has been made very clear on this channel. Second things, this virus already exists, and that's what's horrifying about it. The Motaba virus is just a one-to-one replication of Ebola, specifically probably Zaire. Ebola itself is terrifying, so I really don't know why they went with the idea that it should be altered in some way. They could have just as easily made this a movie about Ebola mutating. Granted, if they did that, given the horrors of that nonce virus, which I just learned what a nonce is. Probably don't even actually really know what a nonce is. I just heard it one time. Anyways, what that virus has done and inflicted on our species, it may hit a little too close to home for people, but there are some issues surrounding Ebola that are not really necessarily true with the Motaba virus either. It doesn't make any sense. It's not actually liquefying. Anyways, remember a few years ago when we had Ebola outbreak, I believe it was in Madagascar, one of the nurses ended up getting infected and actually brought her back to the US for treatment, I believe. Everyone then freaked out about that, and when I say this was a few years ago, I think this was pre-2020. I believe so. So imagine like the absolute panic it would induce today. Anyhow, the misnomer surrounding the Ebola virus is that it essentially melts you, which is not really what is happening. The virus is not attacking every single cell in your body at once and inducing apoptosis. There is instead a very specific pattern taking place that would in turn make it appear like you are melting, but really you're just kind of leaking profusely into the surrounding tissue. The Ebola virus typically gains entry into the body via the mucosal membranes, areas around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, broken skin, under your fingernails, that type of deal, or ingesting some fluids somehow. The reality is, Ebola is actually relatively fragile, much like HIV. If the fluid is thin enough that it is in, within minutes, infectivity is lost as sunlight will actually destroy it as long as it's in direct sunlight. However, a giant glob of fluid in the shade, that remains infectious for days. So if you ever see a glob of bodily fluid somewhere, no matter how tempting, don't eat that. A crazy thing to say for humans, but amongst other animals, that is pretty standard. They will just find globs and eat them. It's pretty gross. No other species has the concept of germ theory, so they are susceptible to kind of gross things. So once entering the body, this is where you are totally screwed. Incubation time of Ebola takes anywhere from 2 to 21 days. Now that's pretty standard amongst many infections, and it all goes back to how your immune system is actually primed. In those with weaker responses, it's not that the virus is taking its time just smelling the roses. They're actively being inundated with the same virus in the same amount in the same time frame, but it may actually take longer in those who have been infected to begin showing symptoms. For example, the reason this exists is those who are immunocompromised, it may be 21 days before symptomatic presentation. In those with strong innate responses, the 2-day mark is all it takes before their bodies start to decompensate from the presence of the virus. However, most of us fall right in the middle given the immune system is all about controlled mitigation of responses. Because of this, roughly about 8 to 10 days post-exposure is when a person could expect to start exhibiting symptoms. Now, you may have noticed, that is insanely slow compared to the Motaba virus. In Outbreak, you were talking about literal hours to showing severe symptoms. Between getting pricked in the finger, or splashed with fluid in the lab, or stabbing yourself by accident, to go into a movie later that night and showing severe symptoms that something is very clearly going to be wrong. This is functionally like what it'd be like mentally, bear with me on this one, of driving a Prius with a 20-gallon gas tank versus a 1967 Impala with a 2-gallon gas tank. In the Prius, let's say that's like the normal infection, you can't really see the gas gauge move, whereas with the goated 67 Impala, you can literally watch the needle go to E. Concerning symptoms, standard Ebola would be gradual onset of these symptoms. The Motaba virus, you can actively see yourself declining if you know what you're looking for. Was that the perfect analogy for this? Yeah, and I won't be taking any further questions on it. Thanks for watching. The mechanisms that shift from this disease from days to hours would seem to imply that there are specific events taking place, perhaps actual presence of specific mRNA strands, and possibly even, it would appear maybe viral ribosomal structures, I guess the best way to put it, that would have to exist with its infection and the altering of, it doesn't really alter genetic coding. Instead, it's fully, I guess the best way to say it, in the cytoplasm, and again, the viral ribosomes, in order to build the actual proteins needed to induce the infection as quickly as it is. It simply doesn't look like to me that the Motaba virus is completely reliant on cellular machinery in order to proliferate. However, it would still be using some of the host ribosomes. Given it's clearly an altered form of Ebola, or at least heavily based on it, we can then use the infection pathway that Ebola takes to really just one-to-one apply it to the Motaba virus. However, it's later when differences can be clearly seen, which we'll discuss as well, that you have a ton of issues beginning, like Airborne is way more insurmountable than you might think. So once entering the body, it targets specific cells which disrupt the entire immune system. You can kind of think of this as causing the immune system to overreact in some ways, but completely fail to react in others. Entering the bloodstream, every cell in the immediate area is a mark. The biggest issue being that the macrophages and dendritic cells, as well as monocytes, are going to be kind of what trigger the innate immune responses. Now, you have two forms of the immune system. You have the adaptive, and then you have the innate. The adaptive is sort of like a scalpel, and the innate is a hammer. The innate simply buys enough time for the adaptive to form a response to large-scale infections like T-cell activation, memory B cells getting involved if it's been there before, new B cells proliferating in response to the pathogen, and antibody creation. Now, the innate system, or innate immune system, does have much more use than just buying time. I mean, your innate deals with infections all the time before the adaptive really has to even get involved. But there is much, like, the complexity of these responses, I'm kind of summarizing here, but essentially the adaptive are the heavy hitters. All of this is kicking off with the innate coming across something first, though. When Ebola enters the bloodstream, it will immediately target dendritic cells and macrophages. The issue is macrophages are usually there to start cleaning pathogens out of the bloodstream first, which invariably is going to leave behind the wreckage of this pathogen, like pieces of itself. So the dendritic cells will actually gather up these pieces and take them to B cells for identification to activate the adaptive immune system. However, with these cells being infected, they fail to do this job, meaning the adaptive never gets alerted to an issue. This disrupts the entire response of the immune system from the drop, because antibodies are very effective at stopping Ebola, as we will find. It just needs to be made aware of it first. So along with this, you also have your cells, something known as interferons. These are not only going to disrupt viral replication in the cytoplasm by, turning down the speed of ribosomal mRNA reading, but this also warns other cells that the cell is currently infected, and it attempts to prevent the virus from replicating within itself by using interferons. And then, that's literally the name, it's interfering. So it goes completely scorched earth, so to speak. Interferons actually signal the cell to produce high levels of an enzyme called PKR, or protein kinase R. PKR sits dormant until it detects something that shouldn't be there, specifically the double-stranded RNA often produced when viruses replicate. Once activated, PKR then hunts down a crucial cellular protein called ELF2 alpha, eukaryotic initiation factor 2 alpha, as the whole thing is called. So anyways, we're just going to call it alpha Chad. So normally alpha Chad acts as the green light that allows a ribosome to kind of latch onto a strand of mRNA and begin translating it. PKR modifies this protein specifically, and it effectively kind of turns that green light red. The ribosomes are physically locked out. They can no longer bind to mRNA to initiate the translation process. Like, the viral genetic information is there, but the machines refuse to read them. Simultaneously, interferons also upregulate another defense system known as the OAS, or RNase L pathway. When this system detects viral presence, it activates RNase, which then acts like an indiscriminate cellular wood chipper, which is fantastic. It will aggressively hunt down and shred all single-stranded RNA within the cell, even if it's your own. It destroys the viral RNA before the ribosomes can even get near it. And even if the ribosomes could somehow get past all of this as far as the PKR blockade, there is no intact blueprint left for them to read. However, there is still an issue, because all this sounds too good to be true, right? Shouldn't we overcome Ebola easily? Well, Ebola will actively disrupt this response by blocking the actual interferon response itself. You can see this virus is so finely tuned to the cells that it seems like it was created, but very likely, again, this is just a result of, it's not very likely, it's a result of bat populations refining a virus and making it more dangerous, as is standard on this rock, because everything wants to take us out, because it hates us because we're awesome. Anyways, from here, the situation continues to decompensate. The lower levels of alarms have been cut off entirely, but those same cells, the immune cells, that are infected are still operating somewhat with the virus now in control. The inflammatory response will be turned up to 11 with the knob ripped off. This will flood the bloodstream with inflammatory chemicals that are usually reserved for other areas of the infection process and dealing with it. As these filter through the body, you're going to start feeling like absolute crap, but all the while, Ebola now has moved into the actual endothelial cells of the circulatory system. And this is when you start getting the classic leaky symptom, I guess the best way to put it. By attacking and destroying these cells, with the inflammation signaling being increased, the longer time goes on, the circulatory system starts leaking fluids out into the surrounding tissue. This will eventually build up to such a level that it will begin to leak out of every orifice as well because of the internal pressure. So while the internal pressure increases in the body, blood pressure is inversely being affected. Its own levels are continuing to drop. The problem is, basically if blood pressure drops, so does perfusion of your tissues. Organs begin to receive less and less oxygen as the blood becomes thicker and thicker due to the fluid leaving the circulatory system. And eventually it gets so bad, blood clots will also begin to form just naturally. And this is typically due to the fact that earlier on, if you remember also, the monocytes of the body are being infected. Well, they express a tissue factor incorrectly, which then causes coagulation of blood, and then lower fluid levels are just not going to help. Basically, you have physical components causing blood clots, and then you have the monocytes being like, hey, you know it'd be fun? Let's start clotting. So bleeding will appear in the mucosal areas, bruising is incredibly common, and ultimately, internal hemorrhaging will begin to build up. While this is happening, key organs will begin to feel the effects first. Liver injuries are incredibly common in Ebola infections, which leads to the collapse of the metabolism of this person. Along with this, as the liver is deprived of oxygen and overwhelmed with other toxic byproducts, that is tasked with filtering out, this will continue to damage and destroy the liver and then build up, leading to the death of the organ. Any operational cells at this point will quickly be destroyed shortly after, as the entire system now fully collapses. Coupled with this, adrenal glands will begin to start releasing cortisol like absolute mad lads, as they're no longer coordinating as well. The catecholamine system will actually also collapse, which ends up furthering issues by relaxing blood vessels, sending blood pressure even lower on a struggling system, resulting in even slower blood and less perfusion of organs. Because of all this, the gastrointestinal tract now makes the scene and will start dying and just straight up leaking its contents into the surrounding area, and this will further cause dehydration, leading to the aforementioned issues. Eventually, the kidneys, they've been struggling the whole time with filtration due to the level of toxicity, as the nephrons are totally destroyed, and they will fail as well. If you're somehow alive at this point, you will be almost in complete and total MODS, or multi-organ dysfunction syndrome, and your organs are gonna just die. You're gonna drop of a heart attack probably first, because, if you didn't think this was affecting your heart, brother, that thing is the driver of the struggle bus, and it is like trying its damnedest to keep you going, but it's not looking good. So somehow, past all this, you're like still vibing, and you're like, you know what, I feel like crap, but I'm okay. Well, now it's time for the entire immune system to kind of collapse as well. The cells undergo mass apoptosis, which can actually lead to the entire decimation of a level of response to any illness. Not to mention, usually by now, a cytokine storm would have ensued, which is your body's nuclear option if it knows it's losing the fight, which is basically inflame everything all at once everywhere, which historically, not great. So somehow you were able to come back from any of this. A cold could take you out because you simply just couldn't respond to it to deal with the infection, as the body would not even know where to begin. So pretty messed up, right? Well, not all is lost, really, because as our species continues up the technological ladder, it's not like we aren't learning about these things and how to prevent them or even treat them. Initially, for a very long time, there's actually not much that could be done apart from giving oxygen and fluids, attempting to keep the body hydrated and stave off the more horrific aspects of Ebola. But now, there are much more effective treatments, and it's all related to the glycoproteins of Ebola. There are essentially 4 major strains of Ebola that we know of: Zaire, Sudan, Bundi Bugyo, and Reston. Pretty sure I said Bundi Bugyo correctly. Zaire has a 60-90% mortality rate, so that's the one the Motaba virus is 100% based on. Sudan is 40-60, Bundi Bugyo is 25-50, and Reston is actually non-lethal in humans. Zaire clearly is the most notorious of all these strains, but even with that, there are survivors, and those that do survive, their antibodies have been taken and synthetically replicated. These are what are known as monoclonal antibodies. Typically, in the treatment of Ebola, the Ebola virus needs to be neutralized so that your body has a chance to destroy it. The glycoproteins on Ebola will actually bind to the receptors of the host cells and then force themselves into the cytoplasm. The monoclonal antibodies, they will instead bind to these proteins on the Ebola, it's absolutely just covering it, preventing it from actually being able to bind to a cell. The macrophage can then engulf it and destroy it because it has the ability to do so. However, even with this treatment, if symptoms present, it's largely too late unless it's super early in the presentation of symptoms, as the body has had too many cells invaded, which will actually lead to the person still being destroyed. The main thing that's going to lead to success is timing. If you can catch it early enough, you can prevent Ebola from getting a foothold. And this is the biggest issue with the Motaba virus. The first version of it is simply spread using bodily fluids as a vector. Its incubation time is on a level of hours, not days. As a result, standard monoclonal antibodies will not work. To further this issue, the Motaba virus has mutated and become airborne, which, I don't know if you know this, but that would be absolutely insane if Ebola ended up doing this. If I remember, while Marburg is not Ebola, at first they thought initially it was airborne, but it actually spreads through fluids instead. That sparked a massive panic there for a while because we do not want Ebola going airborne. But for this infection to go full on airborne, it's not going to be just a single mutation. Thankfully, which we should all be happy about, it's a massively difficult thing given the very nature of Ebola and, as a result, Motaba as well. The Motaba virus actually steals some of the cell membrane from the host cell that it infects, and this is how it's able to link up with other cells so easily. When you sneeze or cough with Motaba, you are expelling these pieces, but they're not innately very airborne. They fall immediately to the ground, where they should stay. Without these lipids, the virus actually dries out and dies, as it should get dunked on. And that's the first issue. The second issue is to spread effectively through the air, a virus must be highly specialized to attack the upper respiratory tract. It needs to easily bind to specific proteins on the surface of cells lining your nose, throat, and lungs. Filoviruses do not natively actually target the respiratory epithelium in this way. They prefer actually targets of like macrophages, dendritic cells, and the endothelial cells lining blood vessels. To become a respiratory pathogen, a virus would need a complete overhaul of its surface glycoproteins to change its key to fit a completely different cellular lock. The third issue is viruses mutate constantly, but they do so to maximize their immediate survival and spread, usually taking the path of least resistance. Completely re-engineering its physical envelope to survive aerosol desiccation and simultaneously overhauling its receptor binding affinity is such a massive and ridiculous biological jump that it just doesn't happen. In nature, filoviruses are already highly successful at spreading through their natural reservoir, which are bats, and through opportunistic contact with humans. There is little pressure, I guess, needed to basically have them rebuild their entire architecture to become airborne. But humans being humaning, we actually engineered Motaba like the absolute Brads and not absolute Chads in this case. So these mutations were able to be achieved through a very small and localized population because they were induced by our brains, which is because we wanted an actual, weapon. But whatever the cure is at the end seems to work, which it cannot be antibodies, as it appears to actually stop the infection in its tracks. It's also not just that, but it's also stopping the cascade of consequences from taking place from cells already infected. So then, how is that possible? Well, yes, but actually no. Betsy the monkey has the antibodies as it didn't get sick when it got infected. That's cool and all, but when humans contract this illness, when symptoms display, there's already very real and very present consequences that would take weeks to recover from if you could at all. At its most basic level, you would have to switch off the inflammatory response, which would also be going absolutely haywire. The serum would have to have a system-wide effect, I guess you could call it, destroying every inflammatory molecule induced by this infection, and then override the organ's freak-out mode, as well as its own damage that's already incurred. This does not exist in medicine. You cannot just stop the signaling, because actually in other ways, it would cause issues that would actually create secondary problems you couldn't even account for. So another issue is, remember how the endothelial cells are basically floating in the bloodstream at this point because they were exploded? Well, those would have to be put back together, or at minimum, cellular regeneration would need to take place to the point that it would actually rival cancer. That technology doesn't exist. This stands true in all cellular apoptosis as well. All cells destroyed would need to be repaired or magically come out of some defunct state that aren't clogging your organs anymore. The issue with the Motaba and the serum that cures it is it's kind of not really being treated like a pathogen. It's already done damage to the body. Instead, it's treated like something that is causing your cells to behave inappropriately, which then leads to these issues. That is not what it's actually doing, though. It is destroying the body on a cellular level, which means as it's inducing symptoms, those cells are already gone. The only real true option is to catch it soon enough, to preemptively give everyone in the town the serum, which then they could accomplish this task. However, everyone who's already infected is already completely boned given how fast the infection induces symptoms. Private Pervert is definitely gone, and anyone else who's been infected, such as ex-wife, probably gone too, or at minimum would have lasting damage to their bodies, as the threat of blood clots for months would still present itself. And this would be a massive undertaking concerning this repair for the body. And in fact, like a few days later, everyone's just like high-fiving each other and dancing. It's super dumb. It's not what's gonna happen, dude. You're gonna be down and out for months as your body repairs itself. So overall, cool idea. Well, once again, Hollywood they don't really know microbiology. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. This is one of those movies that, as a microbiologist and former scientist myself, I watch just go, what? There's no, really? Anyways, but either way, hopefully you guys did enjoy the episode. And if you did enjoy, then please leave a like and a comment, as it helps get the video out there. Otherwise, you're a huge dork, as I maintain. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Instagram, Roanoke Tales link, and Patreon in the description if you'd like to support the channel. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Army, Kusith, and Monday. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer, Webitron Supreme, and Commander Bothael. Thank you guys as well. At the Scientist tier, we have Some Big Nerd, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, SSJ4 Lotus, and Gina Elaine. Thank you guys. Also, I don't know, I want to say as well, but I didn't want to say it too many times. And to the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. You're absolute ballers. Keeps a lot of things running around here. Well, running around here, I guess you could say. So thank you. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.